Okay, so we're going to start a portion of Nitzavim. Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem Mavnei Hashem Elokechem Rashechem Shiftechem Ziknichem V'Shotrechem Kol Yisrael. You're standing here today, all of you, before Hashem your God, your heads of your tribes, or actually, Rashi translates it, your heads, your tribes. Rashechem with shiftechem, your heads by your tribes, Rashi saying. Your elders, your officers, every man of Israel. So let's see what Rashi says with this verse. You're standing today, Melamed, Shenichnas Moshe Afnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu B'yomo So Achnis B'bris. That Moshe gathered them all before God on the day of his death. Meaning to say, Hayom means to say it was the day of Moshe's death. In order to bring them into the covenant, meaning to say that they were summoned to a covenantal meeting with God. That's what he's gathering them for. Moshe says on the day of his death, B'yom Moto, he gathers them for a covenantal meeting with God. That's what Rashi is saying. Rashechem shiftechem. This means Rashechem shiftechem. Your heads by your tribes, meaning to say. So it's saying the heads, the tribal princes, and they are higher than the elders, and so therefore they go before them. Zignechem v'shotrechem, your elders and your officers. Hachashuv v'chashuv kodem. First, the most prominent come first. V'achar kain, and afterwards, kol Yisrael, all the men of Israel. So first you have your elders, and then your officers. Mechotei v'itzecha. Okay, no, next verse. This is Tapachem Neshechem, your children, your wives, the Gercha Shebekar Mechanecha, your foreigners who are amongst you, Mechote Veitzecha Ad Shoei Memecha, the wood choppers to the water carriers. For what are the wood choppers? Melamed Shebao Kananiim Litgayer. Rashi has a very, who are going to be the choppers of the wood? Well, it's not going to be the Jews, that's what Rashi is saying. Rashi says that the Canaanites came to convert Bimei Moshe in the days of Moshe. Kederach Shabo Givonim Bimei Yoshua, just like the Givonim came in the time of Joshua. V'zeu Amor beGivonim Vayasu Gam Hema Ba'orma, and the Givonim, they acted with cunning, because it says they also acted with cunning. I'll explain the background here. When it told Moshe Chotfei Eitzim V'Shoavei Mayim, Moshe made them hewers of wood and drawers of water. Hello, Seth. Good afternoon. So let me just give a background here. And Rashi has it's not the simple reading, but this is the reading that Rashi makes. So in the book of Joshua, we know that Joshua was commanded to wipe out the nations amongst them. They weren't allowed to let anybody live, but there were people who lived there called the Givonim, and they disguised themselves and made believe that they came from far away. And they made under those false pretenses, they made Joshua take an oath of peace treaty. And then it turned out that they were really their neighbors. So Joshua didn't want to violate the oath because it would look bad. So he made an agreement to keep them alive, but he made them the wood choppers and the water carriers. So there it says, and they also acted with cunning. So that means that there was an earlier group that did this as well. And who's the earlier group? The earlier group was the Canaanites did the same trick to Moshe. So here's what the footnote reads, according to Mizrahi, these Canaanites also acted with cunning. They pretended they weren't Canaanites, and they came to Moshe and they said, look, we're not Canaanites, can you make a peace treaty with them? And even though Moshe didn't enter into a treaty with them, he accepted them as converts and decreed them to be assigned to menial labor. So therefore, it means that the covenant was made with them as well. Excuse me, this is a radical reading because we're almost saying that they were allowed to keep people alive. They were allowed to keep the seven nations alive if they came and submitted themselves as wood choppers or water carriers, and then they were taken into the covenant. Whereas the earlier reading of Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 20, I look back, seems to say that you can't keep the Canaanites alive at all. So
part of the covenant. Does that not make them Jews? But
Well, it seems if they're part of the covenant, it means that seems like they were responsible, but they were part of the covenant, but they were the wood choppers and the water carriers.
I thought the Torah addressed this earlier, that we could keep them alive. This isn't new news.
So earlier we had said in 20 in Deuteronomy, I think it's 20. Let me just make sure because we're going drilling down here. That it says.
Didn't we come to a point where they were going to attack us and then?
Yeah. So chapter 20, verse 10, there verses 10 through 20, there we're saying that if you find the Canaanites in a faraway place, that if a Canaanite moves from Canaan to Japan, so then you could keep him alive if he submits himself. But if he's in Canaan, then you can't keep him alive. So here they came to Moshe. Now Moshe was not yet in Canaan, but he was really about to go in. And they discuss that here. So here it says Moses did not accept them as converts with all the privileges of conversion because he saw they only wished to adopt Judaism, not out of love of Torah, but out of fear of being killed. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated, this, how you read these sources, but you have a question, Ben? You look like you're about to ask. Okay, fine. I remember you focused on this passage last time. I think you had some follow-up questions about it last time. Okay, so then also the wood choppers to the water carriers, I have to admit here that I have a reading personally that goes against the literal meaning of the text. They seem to be saying that the wood choppers and the water carriers, the simple reading of the text is that these are the least prestigious members of the society. Judy, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, we're doing Shoftim, right?
We're doing Nitzavim, this week's portion.
Oh, okay. I thought something else. Okay, sorry.
Nitzavim,
I was sleeping while I was driving.
Yeah. Now, by the way, now what's going to happen is I could be sued if you be very careful now, so nobody sues me for for engaging you in the class while you're driving. So I was about to say my bias is that the literal text seems to be saying that the wood choppers to the water carriers are like the least prestigious members of the society. But I remember that who carries the water? There's another way to read this. Who carries the water? The firefighters. Firefighters have to carry the water to put it out. So then we're reading the firefighters as the most important members of the society. From the wood choppers, okay, the wood choppers, maybe that's like the physical labor, the water carrier.
In many cases, it's women who went to the well.
But they already say the women.
Yes, but they already say men too, but then you have, wood choppers that are also men.
Well, where do they say the men? They say the elders.
Every man of Israel.
All right, cool. Okay, it could be the women. I'm
just saying, if you're looking for ways to go, the women went to the well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Water drawer,
Yeah,
aren't you,
yes.
isn't it maybe pushing it a little far to say firefighters? Water drawer is still sustenance, it's important, it's what you have to.
Yeah, I admit that this is not the literal reading, but I always think in my mind about it. I admit that it's not the
phrase.
It's just a poetic read. Yes, I'm sorry, Steve.
Well, the subordinate phrase starts in the stranger in the midst of your camp, from the hewer of your wood to the draw of the water. So it sounds to me like they are not.
Right.
They're foreigners.
Yeah, that's the simple reading too. I agree with you, Steve, but I was just putting it out there.
Otherwise, you put that up front.
Yeah.
And then talk about the stranger who lives.
I don't disagree. I was trying to say. I don't think there was a professional firefighting class back then anyway.
Poetry is good.
Have to wait for Ben Franklin.
Yeah, there were, I don't
have to
believe,
believe the water was used to drink and not worried about putting fires out.
or the water was used for cleaning, they had to wash their clothes.
More important.
Yeah. So for you to pass into a covenant of Hashem your God of Awaso, and to his oath, Asher Hashem Elokecha Korei Simcha Hayom, God is making a covenant with you today. Okay, fine. What does the verse say? Avracha Leoscha Over Babris. For you to be passing into the covenant. And it doesn't make sense to say Kamula Avircha, to make you pass, for you to perform them. So what's Rashi saying? Rashi's saying is basically that you're entering into the covenant. But I do want to say that, of course, we remember what it talks about when Abraham made a covenant, and there was a covenant of the pieces, the Brit Bein HaBetarim, where there were two animals on either side, and Abraham passed through. So the way they used to make a covenant, they don't say it here, Rashi doesn't say it, but to pass through into the covenant, there was in the Bible and other sources that there would be something on either side and you passed through. And that was a sign that you were entering into the covenant. That was a way a covenantal relationship was formed in the Bible.
Like a Kenyan?
Kenyan is like just like a formalizing of a.
It's the same thing, you're passing through.
Yeah, exactly. So you pass through, and it's like Rahman al-Islam. When you imagine after somebody buries a person, you walk through two lines.
Mm.
So, but that's almost like the way a covenant was made also, that they had animals on either side and they walked through, or they had different things on either side and you walked through. It was like a formalizing of it. But Rashi doesn't say that here. Rashi is saying, Rashi says it right here. What am I? No wonder I remembered it. Because it was from Rashi from last year. That should teach me right. Rashi says, Derech Havar, this is the way you would pass into a covenant. Kachayu Kortim Bris. That's how they would make a covenant. They would make a barrier on one side, a barrier on the other. And they would pass before them. Like the calf which they cut in two, and they would pass through it. And they cite here the Rashi too, Genesis 15:10. So that's exactly what I just said, and I knew I learned it somewhere. It's from Rashi. Yeah. So, in order to establish you today as a people, and he will be for you for a God. Like he spoke to you, like he swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm not just making the covenant with you yourself. So let's see what Rashi says. To establish you today to be for a nation. He takes the initiative to put himself to so much trouble in order to establish you before him as a people. And he will be for you as a God. He spoke of you and he swore to your fathers. God promised your fathers he's not going to exchange them to another nation. That's why he binds you with these oaths. They shouldn't antagonize him because he can't separate himself from you. That's kind of ironic. The point of this covenant was not to found the nation, but it was to make sure that the Jewish people wouldn't violate the covenant. God's already promised to be with them, to their ancestors. And Hashem says, I don't want you to violate this because then we're going to have problems because I have an earlier promise. Now Rashi says something beautiful. He says, Up until now, I've given the literal explanation of the passage. Midrash Agadah, but now there's a midrash. Let's see what Rashi says. This is a homily. A homily is almost like poetry, Ben. So what's the homily? Rashi says, why is this passage, our portion, following the previous passage, which we read this past Shabbos, which was the passage of the curses? There were, in chapter 28 above, there were 98 curses. In addition to that, there were 49 curses in the book of Leviticus at the end of Parashas B'chukosai. Horiku Paneim. The people, when they heard all these curses, their faces turned pale. They said, we can't do it. It's too much for us. So it was like, then Moshe began to try and appease them. He said, don't worry, you're still here. You caused a lot of anger to God till now. He hasn't destroyed you. You're still here. So that's the first thing he's saying. Okay, don't think it's too hard for you because you're still here. Hayom, kayom hazeh, doesn't mean this is the day of Moshe's death, but Moshe's, according to this approach, Moshe's saying, just like today is a day, Shu Kayam, which exists, Blumafil Meir, becomes dark and light, Kach Ha'ir Lachem, so that God give you light. V'kach Hatir Ha'ir Lachem. Yeah, Judy, you had a question?
Yeah, why are some of the kalot in singular and the others in plural?
So okay. Let me finish this Rashi. I'll come back to your question. It's a very important question. We did it last week with Rashi, but let me just finish this Rashi. I'll come right back to it. So did he give you light? And the curses and the afflictions sustain you. And they keep you standing. Meaning to say, it's words of consolation. You saw everything that Hashem did. So Rashi is saying that Moshe is saying here that Moshe is trying to build up the people because the people were saying we can't survive. So Moshe says, no, you have survived till now, even though you've made God very upset. And these curses are ways of just keeping you alive, sustaining you. So now I'm just pause on the Rashi and say Judah asked a question about the curses in general, which we did cover last week in the Rashi, and that was why are the curses, some curses in the singular and some in the plural. And Rashi said last week that the curses in Deuteronomy were in the singular because Moshe was saying them himself, whereas the curses in Vayikra were in the plural because that was God speaking. And because Moshe was saying it, he went easier on the people. And he said it's not going to apply to everybody, it's just going to apply to people individually. You found that?
I thought that the one of them is, as a whole. That's the singular. But don't think that, it's not you also. So, he spoke, you as a nation. And so maybe not me, maybe just the nation. Not, maybe it's not just me.
Oh, so
maybe
that's
I'm Potter.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. It's not what Rashi says in the last week's portion, but it's a very, makes sense. I'm sure a different commentary says it. I didn't see that one, but it makes sense. Shkoyach. Okay, good job. Okay, how was it, Reb David? Davar achar, alternatively, Rashi gives a third approach to what does it mean? Atem nitzavim, you're standing. Yisrael yotzin miparnes laparnes, Moshe Yoshua. Moshe, because since Israel was going out from one leader to another leader, they were leaving Moses and going to Joshua. He made an assembly of them, to encourage them. I mean to say, when the leader was dying, he gathered them all together and he said, don't worry about it. We're going to go on. We're passing the torch. So too did Joshua, became Shmuel, and so too Shmuel. Stand and I shall contest with you. So this is what the leaders did. They gathered everybody together before they died, and they gave them words of inspiration, encouraged them to go on. Very inspiring scene. You had a question, Shoshana? Okay. So those are three, let's just summarize, three things about your standing here today. The first approach is to say that Moshe, on the day of his death, he brought everybody together and make a covenant. The second explanation is Moshe says, you're still standing. You're worried about all the curses, you're still standing. And the third approach is that Moshe was saying before he died, he gathered them together to stand them up, so to speak, to pass the torch and to strengthen them. Okay, so now Moshe says, I make the covenant with those who are here today and with those who are not here. I'm making this covenant with those who are here and those who are not here. Even the future generations. How could he be binding the future generations? That's it. We're bound by this covenant. Moshe makes the covenant with, hello, Rebel Larry. Great to see you, my dear friend. He makes the generation with even those generations who are not here today. So that's a powerful concept. And we're all bound by the same covenant. Like it or not, or we're bound by the covenant.
Isn't that why we're all standing at Sinai? I
Yeah.
wasn't there, really, I'm not that old,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point, that we were all, so to speak, standing there at Sinai, except the text doesn't literally say that. This is the closest that we could be bound by an agreement that our parents made. We're bound by it, future generations. But we're going to stop the recording here, and we're not going to shut the Zoom. We're stopping the recording.